in terms of advocacy, in terms of like Tibetan youth reaching out to non-Tibetan supporters, you being a non-Tibetan supporter yourself, what I guess, what would you recommend? Like we talk about, I don't know, because like there's a lot of general things we can talk about. We can talk about how human rights is universal. You know, everyone should care about human rights and stuff. But specifically, I guess.
There's an expression called talk is cheap. You've got to do more than talk. Certainly, one of the messages that I wanted to bring, it'll probably come up several times in this discussion, I hope, is that if you don't get involved politically, you're missing a big opportunity to influence policy. And I don't see Tibetans getting that involved politically. Not just by voting. You should. But you should be part of Peggy's campaign. You should be part of the campaign of the Liberal member. You should be part of the campaign of the Conservative, particularly in areas where there's enough Tibetans to make some difference to be there, so that when you go to them for something, it isn't just, sure, I'll try to help you. They need you to get them elected. And I'm not speaking derogatively about that. And I hope Peggy will make a comment on it. This is something you're not doing. And it's difficult to talk to the people my age, of your community I'm talking about. We've got to talk to you guys. Let me give you an example of one single man who's got more clout with cabinet ministers than I have. His name is Pishing, or Pixing as we call him. He's a member of the Falun Gong. Every time there's an election, every time there's anything political, he rallies his people to help certain candidates. And they're in different parties. They're not stupid, right? Joe Oliver, who is the Minister of Finance, has been a friend of mine for 30 years. And I happen to be a supporter of his. And I see him quite a bit. So we're at an event, and Pixing comes up. Joe goes up, Pixing, how are you? Nice to see you. Right? You understand this. So this is one of the things that I think you need to do. But frankly, if you come to me with 2, 3 people, it's good. But you have how many thousands of Tibetans in Toronto today? So political involvement is the single most important thing for me to talk to you about today. Because in politics, municipal, provincial, federal, is where decisions are made. And I'm going to give you an example. Now, hardly anybody knows about this, but just to make the point. TCCC, Cultural Center. There's a lot in the back. So, what do we do? And I said, why don't you start a seniors residence for Tibetans? Well, there's no zoning and so forth. That's putting roadblocks where they don't exist. Zoning is a function, basically, of the municipal government. And many, many organizations, if they do it for the right reasons, will get spot zoning. And if you take a look, it isn't that there isn't any residents around there. Half a block away, it's all residential. And it's for the public good. It's long-term care for seniors that without that kind of a facility will have to be housed in hospitals when they can't look after themselves. And the cost of a hospital per person is 10 times what it is in a home for the aged. So, what do? You go to Sherry de Novo. And I go to Laurie Scott, or maybe to Patrick Brown. you have these connections, right? And you say, we want to start this. So if you can say to us, maybe you should talk to the municipality, we have something we can do. They have to assign the province assigns the beds, that is the spots, the beds. So that if you want a home for 60 or a home for 30 or a home for 100, that's will be decided. And then once you've got that, is look, the province has said we can have it, you start a discussion, and it's not difficult. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. You can't do that unless you have that kind of a relationship. Just one silly example that I've been talking to the folks at TCCC for a few months now, because of my involvement, right? So, directly to your question, support those politicians who support you. And make sure that you don't support just one party. Don't even mind. You gotta support them all. As an example, here you certainly support Peggy. Maybe where the TCCC is, you support somebody else. You support the Conservative member because he's a local member over there. That's the kind of thing that I think, you have to do. That is, and I said it'll probably come up again. Any comments on that, just in general terms?
Yeah, I think that the Tibetan community, because it's newer, has not been doing that kind
We're
of
talking to these kids, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, if you look, just your example of a senior's home, if you look over at Roncesvalles and Queen, there's the Polish seniors home there. In other communities, there's a Ukrainian seniors home, and so that's just one example. There are, you have the cultural center, but there are other institutions and things you can get, but it is about building a relationship in politics, and it is about numbers. It is. If someone comes as one person, you can support because you think it's the right thing to do, but obviously the more people you have involved, the more effective it is. And one thing I've seen with the Tibetan community is that you have the capacity to mobilize big numbers of people at the cultural center, for example. And so the question is, what are your political goals? And it's about having relationships with individuals, but it's about where does the community want to go? I think that was the point. I thought that was a very interesting point you made, and I'm not sensitive to the divisions in the community. I'm not familiar with that, but I think it is important that as a community you have goals, and then you look for allies to achieve those goals, and then you foster relationships with those allies in order to achieve those goals, and exercise your power, because if you don't use the power that you have, someone will use your power on your behalf, and it may not represent what you want. So
I just wanted to ask specifically, I guess, Senator, you wouldn't count as much in this just because you're so invested that you kind of know the inside part of a lot of our community. But let's say Peggy, for example, you've been to quite a few events. Just recently was the Rosary event, and I guess if you were to draw some sort of a line, would you say that any demand towards you from the community, or any aspiration of the community was presented to you, or it's been more kind of casual?
no one has come to me and said, we would like your support to do something. In the past, as I said, around the Beijing Olympics, people wanted support in Parliament. I put a motion in the House at that time. We got support for that. Support for the refugees coming, support for the cultural center. But no one has come to me for a long time and said, we want your support for something. So I don't know. It's funny because I was saying to Tenzin, who works in my office, I was saying, it seems like nothing has been happening. What can we do? How can we help? And in a way, when I thought about it,
Fix
that
it.
was kind of surprising to me. Why aren't people, so like this, no community says, well, we have everything now, we don't need any help with anything. I know there are lots of issues, and some of the issues are the issues that everyone has. People want jobs, they want housing, they want help for their kids, you know, these are everybody's issues. But how can the community, the Tibetan Canadian community, work together to exercise its power in the community to advance the interests of its members? And it could be something locally, as in the senator has suggested. It could be something international. It's up to you to decide. But no one has come to me for a very long time. I guess the last thing was a petition
For
For
Kempo
Kempo
Karse.
Karse.
for Kempo Karse.
Yeah.
That was the last thing, and we went out and we canvassed and we got signatures for that.
And I've updated our community before, but you know, we've actually made significant progress with that campaign. That was around, what, May of last year?
Yeah.
I think, because his sentence was declared in October, which is just a few months ago actually. And he was originally going to possibly get a life sentence or a death sentence, but he got a very minimal sentence of 2.5 years, which is still bad, but it's
You
also
reported
quite-
that back to me, which
I
I
did, yeah.
appreciated, yeah.
So, you know, it's
But
actually a
it
great
wouldn't have
example.
happened, it wouldn't have happened if the world hadn't got behind it.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
So I think that, is credit to Peggy Nash's effort and everyone in the community too. So yeah, there has been results. Maybe now we need to come to you with the next thing, because we have quite a few things.